there are a handful of us on each side who've had the honor and privilege of serving their states as the chief executive. And so it's a real honor to be here. And I bring that experience with me, and I think every one of us brings that experience with us. I not only bring that experience, but I did almost 3 decades in the Idaho State Senate balancing a budget. And indeed, I was in the leadership having to do what the leadership does here as far as bringing the two ends together, because we have a balanced budget requirement in the state of Idaho, just as virtually every other state does. And does that create some angst when you're the chief executive or when you're in the legislative process trying to balance? Of course it does. I'm sure that the presiding officer wound up with the same thing in her great state as she tried to balance the budget, because no matter how much money you have, it is never enough. And as you've pointed out, Senator Johans, that it is a matter of priority. This is not rocket science. What the states do, and indeed what businesses do, and indeed what families do around the kitchen table, either formally or informally, they anticipate how much money is going to come in over the year, sometimes over the month, sometimes over the week. They anticipate how much money is going to come in. And then they say, well, we have priorities. What is our first priority? Well, of course, in a home, you've got to be able to eat, you've got to have the utilities paid and a roof over your head, so those become very important. To a government, obviously, if it's a state government, education is the largest expenditure for virtually every state. For the federal government, obviously, the highest priority is national defense. But you make a list, and then what you do is you allocate the money you have to that list. Now, when you're done, nobody ever stands up and say, boy, that went really well. We have enough money. We've got everything funded. We're able to do everything we want to do. No, absolutely not. Indeed, around here in this city, this government is spending $3.8 trillion, and I can tell you there isn't a day goes by where we don't get hit up with somebody saying, you know, it's not enough. Our agency does not have enough money. Why, we can't even blank, fill in whatever you want, whatever agency it is. Everybody tells you they don't have enough money. And yes, that's right, because a balanced budget requirement acknowledges a plain, simple fact of life, and that is there are not enough resources to do everything that you want to do. Indeed, a lot of times, there isn't even enough money to do what you need to do. But what you have to do is you have to do the best you can with what you have. Without a balanced budget amendment, it becomes just the opposite of that. You just keep spending. People say to me, well, Jim, you've been in public service all your adult life. Has anything in Washington, D.C. surprised you? And I said, yes, but only one thing. The stuff that goes on here doesn't surprise me at all, except the cavalier attitude that this city has, and indeed this institution has, for the value of money. It just astounds me that in this institution, they don't stop spending money when they hit the end of the budget, or they don't stop spending money when they hit the end of the resources. They stop spending money when they run out of time. That seems to be the only sideboard on how much money that is spent. Well, if you look around, and people will criticize us on this and say, oh, you foolish Republicans, what are you talking about? You balanced budget amendment, why that's really dumb. You know what I say to them? Look at the states. Look around at the states. Now, there are 2, maybe 3 states that are having very, very difficult financial situations. And it's because they either don't have a balanced budget amendment or they've done some skullduggery to get around the balanced budget requirement that they have. But every other state has their financial house in order. Has it been painful? Of course it's been painful. It's painful to everyone when they don't have enough money, including American families. But that's simply the way it is. Well, one of the problems we're having here is the basic foundation of the difference between Republicans and Democrats. People who say there's no difference between Republicans and Democrats ought to come here and spend a day here. They would find that philosophically, we are hardwired very differently, like 2 brands of computers trying to talk to each other. We are hardwired differently. Republicans believe that this nation was founded with the idea that you would have a limited central government. It was founded by people who indeed feared a central government, who, by the way, their fear, as we see every day now, is very well founded. We believe in a limited government. We believe in individual responsibility. We believe in the responsibility of the states. It's hard to find people in this town that actually believe that the states are sovereign, that it was the states that created the federal government and kept the leash on it and said that you can only have the powers that we are specifically putting into this Constitution. Now, the courts over the years have expanded that dramatically, but nonetheless, the vision that the Founding Fathers had, that the American people had when they put together the country that created the most successful, the wealthiest, the culture that enjoyed the best quality of life that anyone on the face of this planet has ever enjoyed before, the Founding Fathers said, look, we're going to create a government for the individual, to give the individual the ability to prosper, to give the individual opportunity. That's what they said. They didn't sit around the table and say, you know what, we need a nanny state. We need to create a government that's going to take care of every American from the time they're born until the time they die, just like in Europe. In Europe, the government pays for your birth. In Europe, the government pays for your funeral. And indeed, it pays for a whole lot of everything in between there, including every dime you spend after you retire. That is not what America was founded to do. They did not sit around and say, how can we take care of the whole society? They said, how can we defend this country? How can we make sure that no enemies come into this country? How can we make sure that people have the opportunity to succeed? Yes, some will fail. Yes, some will succeed. Yes, we're going to have poor people, and yes, we're going to have rich people, because that's what a free society is all about. But everybody's going to have the same opportunity. Everybody that's born into this country or becomes a naturalized citizen in this country is going to have the opportunity to succeed in a greater fashion than anyone on the face of this planet has ever succeeded before, and they're going to do it without government interference. My goodness, how far we have come from those days, and not in a good way. They couldn't conceive that they needed a balanced budget amendment, because the numbers we're talking about, they'd never heard of. The guy sitting around the table, if you'd have said, by the way, do you know the country's going to be over $1 trillion in debt someday? They said, well, what's $1 trillion? How many zeros is that anyway? They couldn't even conceive of that. So they didn't put that in the Constitution. But this isn't difficult to do. It's how much comes in and how much comes out, and they need to equalize each other. Now, I'll be the first to admit that our two parties don't understand each other. As I said, we're hardwired differently, and I have a lot of good friends on the other side of the aisle. We have good conversations. They don't understand how I can possibly think that we could have a balanced budget. And I guess I don't understand how they think that we can spend ourselves into prosperity. We are indeed hardwired differently than each other. But I watched one of the leaders the other day come out here on the floor, and he was carrying on about how bad the balanced budget amendment was, and he said it would be an admission of the failure of this institution to be able to do its job. It would be abdicating our ability to do our job. Well, look around. We are $14.3 trillion in debt. You think the American people think we're doing our job when we're at $14.3 trillion in debt, and now debating adding another $2.4 trillion to do that? If you come here and you spend a little bit of time here, you will understand that this institution cannot budget and do so responsibly. Given the opportunity, it will spend and spend and spend, and the only way this can be changed is if we have a balanced budget provision in the United States Constitution, just like virtually every state in America has. We're going upside down at the rate of $4 to $5 billion a day. We're borrowing new money, $4 to $5 billion a day. That's about 12 hours of the entire annual budget for the state of Idaho. This can't go on. The way to fix it is with a balanced budget requirement that, yes, puts a new rule in place. And you need rules, you need sideboards when it comes to spending money. And I want to thank you, Senator, for providing us with this opportunity. Those of us who've actually lived in the real world where you couldn't print money, you couldn't borrow the kind of money that you're talking about here, where you had to make responsible decisions. And it's time that this government did that, and the only way it's going to do that, regardless of the flowery speeches that are given during campaigns of, oh, send me to Washington, I'll take care of this, I'll see that the balance is budget, I won't overspend. And they come here and they do it. The only way this can be done is to balance the budget. Now, we can't, to have a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, we can't do this. The American people have to do this. We can vote to ask the American people, do you think we should have a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution? Well, let's find out. Let's find out. There can't be anything wrong with giving the American people the ability to do it. It takes 3/4 of the states to ratify this. Let's give them the opportunity. Let's have the debate. Let's pass this and give it to the states and see if they do that.